funny you say that because my initial response to anesthesia was, oh, this is terrifying. And so as a student, I thought, all right, it scares me enough that I need to do something about that.
What do leadership, Muppets, and anesthesia have in common? Apparently today's guest. In this episode of Vet Life Reimagined, I'm joined by Dr. Kate Bailey, a veterinary anesthesiologist who is as passionate about quality education and leadership as she is about delivering exceptional patient care. From numerous initial mind changes on her career path to deciding to figure out how to improve veterinary education, Kate's journey through vet med is anything but boring. We talk about her wild ride through the options in veterinary careers, why being terrified of anesthesia actually pulled her in, and how embracing humor and adult learning principles helped shape her as both a clinician and educator. Plus, she drops golden nuggets of advice about career growth and positive leadership. Whether you're just starting out in vet med or reevaluating what's next, Kate's insights will inspire you to lean into curiosity, embrace change, and maybe even laugh a little more along the way. Let's get to the conversation with Dr. Kate Bailey. When did you know you were interested in veterinary medicine?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say I'm one of those like quintessential veterinarians who at the age of 5 was like, animals are pretty cool. And I want to do things to save animals. And then so my mom was a veterinary technician
Uh,
and she retired in the last like 10 years or so, but she was a veterinary technician for 40 something years. So that kind of grew and changed as I got older and, went to work with her sometimes. And she got me my first job as a vet assistant. And so, yeah, started super early and then kind of just snowballed into something bigger and different.
So I'm so curious, at that time, as you were growing up and seeing your mom at work and things, did she give you any advice when it came to the veterinary profession, or what did she kind of talk about?
Oh, that's a great question. I think mostly it was just about giving me opportunities. She was very keyed into the fact that that was something I loved. And so she was great at, spotting an opportunity for me to go kind of get more. And, I would say not so much advice, just more so encouragement.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the best thing is just to be there and not necessarily give too much advice. So that's very fair. So when I guess it sounds like you were kind of on a straight track then, kind of the animals in mind. Now, did you grow up in North Carolina? Have you kind of been there?
Didn't. So I grew up on Long Island, New York,
Oh, okay.
and I was basically there through high school. And then I moved to North Carolina to go to undergrad. So I started at NC State too many years ago to mention, and then ended up really loving North Carolina and then stayed here for vet school, et cetera. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, as you were getting into vet school, did you imagine what your career in vet med would look like? Did you have an idea and did that change over time?
Oh, Megan, I changed my mind so many times. So it's funny, you mentioned obviously at a young age, I just said I fell in love with the idea of veterinary medicine. But as I'm sure you could imagine, like I had no idea what veterinary medicine actually was, right? So I'm sure you've seen, on social media and things like that, we'll have those like split screen where it says like what your parents think you do it for a living when you're a veterinarian, what society thinks you do. It was very much that, right? Like I didn't really know. And so when I started vet school, I had this idea that I was going to do equine orthopedics. I love horses. I've been riding horses since I was 2 years old. That's what I wanted to do. Right. And then I got to anatomy. Wow. And I was like, oh no, gross miscalculation. It's not back up. This isn't what I want to do. And so then I fell in love with small animal stuff and got, kind of interested in the very small animal things that are available. I wanted to be a radiologist for a while. I wanted to be Jane Goodall for a while until I learned that she basically just like walked through the jungle and grabbed poop samples. Like it wasn't actually as glamorous as you think. I wanted to do exotics. I wanted to do emergency. I wanted to do a lot of different things. And then I got to my 4th year rotation. So NC State is set up basically with 3 years of didactic and then a 4th year of clinical rotation. And then I got there and every rotation I had, I just kind of fell in love with. So then that it would change my mind every once in a while. And then I remember one of my anesthesiologist mentors pulling me aside and saying, you could be pretty good at this sport. Like, this is something that you seem pretty good at. You should consider it. And I was like, well, thanks, but I'm good. No, thank you. I want to be an ER vet. And so then I started my internship and got into kind of being a grown up doctor myself. And as I'm sure you could imagine, as you remember, probably like the transition to being a doctor from vet school is also very life altering, right? And so I went through a lot of decision making in that year too, and ended up deciding, you know what, I do like the idea of being an anesthesiologist for a couple of reasons. And so ended up going that route, but I changed my mind like no less than 10 times for sure. So
Well, I think that can be a good thing too. And it's not a bad thing to start enjoying all these different things you're trying out.
yeah.
It just means you're excited and that, each little path, you're gonna have at least a little fun. Until you figure out exactly what you wanna do long term. Now, I remember back when I did my rotating internship, towards the end, we actually did have an anesthesiologist come in and start working, and that was the best thing ever. Anesthesia scared the dickens out of me, so knowing that we had an expert there was amazing. Did you have an anesthesiologist when you were an intern, or what was it that kinda clicked that, "Okay, no, I can see myself doing this for a long time?"
Yeah. So funny you say that because my initial response to anesthesia was, oh, this is terrifying. And so as a student, I thought, all right, it scares me enough that I need to do something about that. And so I took a selective course, is what NC State calls them. They're basically like 1 week long intensives where you can immerse yourself in a topic of your choice. So that could be like primate medicine or surgery, or we had a bunch of different ones. Anesthesia was one of those. And so I just kind of tossed myself in thinking like, okay, it's low stakes because I'm still like, I'm a student. They won't, and I ended up loving it by the end. And then with my internship, we did not have an anesthesiologist. So one of my motivating factors was actually that we didn't have one because there were, a couple times where I thought, oh man, this case might have gone differently had we, kind of had that extra layer of expertise in the room or even just as part of the team to kind of round things out. And it felt like that role could have made a big impact in a couple different spots. And we were like a very high end well, specialty hospital. We were doing great medicine and it could have been elevated with an anesthesiologist. So that was actually one of my motivators.
All great stuff, and kudos to you to see that you are scared of something and to lean into it. That takes a lot of guts, so that's awesome. And then I have to ask, and maybe I could have waited, but I'm just so eager to ask this question. I listened to a podcast that you were on that was from the, anesthesiologist organization. I feel bad, I can't remember what the
Okay.
are.
Avis, the
Yes,
North
NAVIC.
the Anesthesia Society. Yeah.
Yes, and you even mentioned that there was a podcast at NC State called Passing Gas. So,
Yes.
I love this, like, gas passer. I love the humor behind this. Is that the culture among anesthesiologists, or just am I lucky enough to run into people with lots of humor?
First off, I love that you are proud at. So I want to take a second and mention that the North American Veterinary Anesthesia Society is a huge resource and a kind of a group that I am. So my bias is that I'm part of the board of directors, but I love that group and I love the mission behind that group, which is to bring educational opportunities and make sure that there is more information and knowledge available to those who might not be anesthesiologists, but want to be better at, get more competent at, or just plain interested in the sport of anesthesia. It's a really great group. And so, yeah, I did a podcast with Bonnie Gatson for that group and mentioned a podcast that I used to do back when I was faculty at NC State. And that was the Passing Gas podcast, where my colleague, Kristen Messenger, and I would basically host a podcast and we would talk about various topics related to anesthesia. And we would bring on guests from faculty that might have expertise in an area we were talking about. Like as an example, when you take radiographs under anesthesia, what happens there? What's going to happen? Let's talk about atelectasis. And so we had one of our radiologist buddies come on and talk about that, et cetera. But yes, we did. We tried to have a little bit of humor associated with it because, I think when you want students to engage in a thing, So adult education is super important to me, and I'm pretty passionate about that. One of the ways that you can get adults to motivate and kind of pay attention and kind of listen to the things, one, podcasts are a great way to do that. So I love that you do this podcast because I feel like it's a great way for people to absorb information. But then also adding that layer of humor, I think can kind of keep people engaged and kind of keep that attention span going. And so that was definitely part of the motivation. I will say that I know a lot of anesthesiologists that fall into like the Muppet, what I call the Muppet category. Like we're all a little goofy. I don't know that that's like universally true, but I do feel like there's a pretty decent percentage of anesthesiologists that have a real good sense of humor. I'm biased though, because I am one of them.
Well, that's also really nice when you are nervous about a particular area. And like you said, it can make you feel a little bit more comfortable. And in fact, I don't want to misquote him because Josh, one of the things that he said about you specifically was that there's power in doing serious work without taking yourself too seriously. And he just talked about being able to have some humor into what you do. And so with such a potentially stressful job that we have, it's not that we aren't taking our job seriously, it's that we can not take ourselves so seriously when we're doing it. But let's go back because the other thing with your wide range of interest, and you even talked about lots of different animals in that as well, doing anesthesiology, you potentially can do lots of different animals. Is that the case? Is that pretty typical that an anesthesiologist can go from a reptile to a mammal? Or, are there specializations? How does that all work? And what were you discovering as you were getting deeper into anesthesiology?
Yeah, I'm guessing similar to most specialties, that is kind of an evolving situation and was a big motivator for me picking that the specialty of anesthesia. So, I mentioned I've been writing resist since I was like 2 years old, but then that I also kind of started getting pulled by the idea of small animal medicine as a student. And so one of the things that is really great about anesthesia is you can, especially in an academic setting, I could go from anesthetizing a cat to a bearded dragon to a corn snake to a horse to a pig. Probably not all in the same day, but like in the same week for sure. And that is something that I kind of loved that I didn't necessarily know exactly what I was going to do every week, especially from a species standpoint. There's so many things that are preserved across species, from a physiology standpoint, and then there are so many things that aren't. And so it's kind of this extra layer of adventure when you have to think through. One of the questions I used to ask my residents during training was, you are asked to anesthetize a Martian. What are the questions you would ask? Like, what do you need to know? So, like, unknown species. It could be, I have to say Martian because, I'm a Muppet, but like, it could be just unknown species X was identified, somewhere in the world, and you have to anesthetize it to get more information about it. Like, what questions do you want to ask? Because, there's an algorithm to it, but the differences can make it pretty exciting. So I mentioned it's evolving. And the reason I mentioned that is because there are a couple different ways to, subspecialize, right? So one of the things that is available in small amounts is this idea of like a zoo fellowship. So one of my fellow colleagues at NC State did the zoo fellowship, and she is an absolute expert when it comes to anesthetizing special species. She's amazing. Her name is Julie Balco, and she has dedicated a lot of her brain power and her time to getting really specialized in that area. There's also a lot of amazing anesthesiologists that specifically focus on equine. That is their passion. That's their expertise. And as a profession, I would defer to them and ask questions, especially about some of those more complicated cases. And then there are some folks who really just kind of narrow in and focus on small animal. And, out in the profession, obviously, in a lot of our hospitals that are small animal only, that can be, a really, really good tool to have. One of the things that's coming down the pipeline that I'm really excited about is this idea of a fellowship within the anesthesia college. So we are in the process of going through the logistics for fellowship for pain. And so, that second A, the ACVAA, right? That was just added officially pretty darn recently, like within the last 10 years. So I think we could do a better job of kind of making sure that the profession as a whole knows that that's something we're passionate about and experts about. And I think this fellowship is going to be a really great thing for our patient population.
Yeah. But it does sound like there's a range. So if you want to be more general and be able to do that, I never
Yeah,
know who I'm going to work on today. Or if you really want to niche down, there's that opportunity. And I was listening to, it was a technician who was a VTS in anesthesiology. And she just talked about how frequently things are changing too. So I can definitely see benefit in specializing so you can keep up with all the different changes.
for sure. Absolutely.
Now, for you, we kind of hinted at it. You were in academia teaching quite a bit. How did you decide to stay in academia?
Oh, yeah. This was another one of those, I was really determined to kind of bring anesthesiology to the private practice part of our profession. That was one of my biggest motivators for doing the residency. And then, as the years of my residency kind of ticked by and my thought process evolved, I thought, so I'll back up a step and say that I think as a professional, one of my motivating forces is how do I make sure that veterinarians are really good at what they do and really happy while they're doing that thing they're good at? Because I think when we can accomplish that, then we have the tools we need to deliver the best patient care possible. So over the course of my residency, I think I just identified that if I could stay in the education space and ensure that every student that came through rotation with me, every student that came through the classroom with me had the tools that they needed to take anesthesia knowledge and turn that into patient care, that they were going to be more confident in their skills, that they were going to have a more clear roadmap on how to do that piece of the job, that I could probably make that a more fulfilling thing for them to do so that they'd actually comply, right? And that meant that the patients they were seeing would have better care. All of that to say, it felt like I could probably influence more people in that direction from an academic setting where I had over 100 students coming through a year versus, focusing on one specific hospital. Although, sometimes like I think about, would it have been even more fulfilling to know that I had a really big impact on a specific patient population? I think you can make that impact in both directions. It's just the academic route felt best to me at that point.
And based off of what I think you started to discover, it sounds like that was a really good path for you. But just kind of reflecting back to the time when you were, specifically teaching, do you have any just very standout stories that come to mind that maybe you think of, oh, wow, that was when it could just been funny that it stuck with you, or maybe like a really proud moment? Any just like really interesting story that stands out?
Yeah. So I have two. That's
Okay.
okay. One is along the vein of you will never get anywhere without failing at a thing. So like you
Okay.
have to do something to figure out how to do a better job at that thing. I think like that tends to be a really powerful way, that experiential learning process. It's a powerful way to learn. So I remember as a very early faculty member, I was writing one of my first exams, and taking exams and writing exams are different things, right? So we do this residency, we specialize, we become faculty, and we are given a teaching percentage. And depending, and timeline again, this is a little different. We've evolved quite a bit, I think, in how much we value educating our faculty to educate. We're getting way better at this. And at the time, I did not realize how ill prepared I was to to do this process. So I wrote what I thought was a really great exam. And that exam had some short answer questions in it. And I remember getting back that round of exams and thinking, oh, they didn't get it. Like I wrote this very specific question and I was looking for a very specific answer, and they did not read what I wrote, or I didn't write what I thought I wrote. So I brought all my exam stuff to one of our educational experts and she went through my exam. She's not a veterinarian, by the way. She was an amazing resource. Mary Wells, she's still at NC State. She took my exam and got a B plus as a non-veterinarian.
Uh-huh.
Oh. Comes to find out, like the educational process for adults is a whole other realm of specialty, right? And I didn't have all of those tools yet. And so she really helps me kind of through the process, but that's, I'm going to call that one of my, like, I stumbled. That was one of my failure stories. And I learned a whole lot about not only how to write exams and like how to approach the educational process, but what additional educational resources I might want and need from that. And then my second story where I thought, oh, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is the right space for me. We had a day on the anesthesia rotation where this is a couple of years ago now, probably more years ago than I think it is. We didn't have a lot of cases. We just had one of those days where like not a lot of people had stuff that needed anesthetized, right? And so as a support service, our busyness level is really determined on the rest of the clinic floor and what folks need for us to kind of tackle. But I still had 5 students with me that I didn't want to waste that day, right? So if in the old format, we had 2 weeks worth of rotation, that's 10 days, maybe less, depending on their on-call schedule, because we would let them go home and sleep. Like, that wasn't a lot of time, actually, if you break it down. And so I didn't want to waste that time. So we kind of on the fly, I thought about what do we do today to make sure they got something out of this. So I set the little game. We did a relay. I would shout out a case and they would have to set up their stations and their anesthesia machine. And they had to set up the anesthesia machine for the patient I described. They had to leak check it. They had to make sure they had all the things on their table for that patient. And I videotaped it. And it was super fun, but also anyone who has interacted with a veterinarian could probably imagine that veterinary students are wildly competitive. It turned into, it was very muppety and very fun. And also, I think by the end, like that group of students probably knew anesthesia machines better than most of my other rotations had, because we had this like intensive time for them to kind of autonomously go through and make machine mistakes. And I would make them leave the room and close their eyes, and I would change the machines and give them problems. And I'd make them come back, and whoever could find the problem fastest, like that kind of thing. So gamification, right? Anytime you can gamify something, even for adults, it turns out retention is better, engagement is better, and they tend to get more out of the experience.
Oh, I
So
bet.
that was like, oh, I'm doing the right, this is the job for me. Well,
And that machine is a big part of, figuring out anesthesia. So that's really helpful. And so, all you talked about the testing was a big memory for you, figuring out how to appropriately ask questions and do exams. And then also to, fill time, but keep engagement of your students so that they get value. All of these things are educational fundamentals. And so you mentioned that the more you were doing this, you really were intrigued by the actual process of education, more so than veterinary education, just education in general, adult learning. So, do
yeah.
you mind describing that a little bit more and then how you decided to kind of pursue that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. This might be a good time to mention, like, I probably changed the way I look at our profession half a dozen times. So, and I don't consider myself to be like the older generation quite yet, although I'm getting there. But, I think this is a really good example of how flexible and wide in variety our profession can be. So, like, if you find yourself in a position where you don't feel like you're contributing the way you want to anymore, there are so many options that still allow you to function within the profession, which is, in my opinion, the best profession in the world, and do that in a way that you feel like you've fulfilled your destiny, like your day, right? So I I mentioned my kind of brain map that got me to I want to stay in academia, and then had my stumbling block over as a brand new educator. Like, how do I feel like I'm messing this up a little bit. Like, how do I get better at this? So then I got really into this thought of like, anesthesia is a field of expertise, but so is education. And we know this, right? You can get a doctor. I've worked with some amazing people who have masters in education, doctorate in education, et cetera. And one thing that occurred to me that I wanted to help be part of is how do we get our veterinary students from, I know this kind of database of knowledge, to I can take that data and that knowledge and practice with it. Because it turns out having all the knowledge in the world doesn't help our patients if we can't apply it in a patient setting, right? Or in a research setting, or, in an industry setting somewhere. And I started to look around and realize there were areas of opportunity. Even, in a setting where like our mission is to teach, right? We're teaching hospital. That was the mission. There was so much opportunity for us to do that in a more intentional, methodical way. So I was really, really lucky to have someone I still consider a mentor and friend and help with a scholarship for me to do the Royal Vet College postgraduate certificate in veterinary medical education. Her name is Laura Nelson. She is one of my heroes. She was our associate dean of academic affairs at the time. And she advocated for me to do this 1 year long remote program where basically I went through and intensively learned about adult education, curriculum building, the way people receive information, and things that you might not expect, like giving and receiving feedback, communicating, with adults, motivators for adults. And if you've ever done any CE and things like leadership, you might notice there are some parallels, right? So interestingly, a lot of the things we learn about adult education are very, very similar to some of the ways we can lead well and positively. And so that was a huge turning point for me. And I felt so much more prepared after I did some of that extra training. And so that led me to think about curriculum as a whole and like, how do we think about the bigger package and how our students move through that? And if we can do that correctly, or at least more strategically, are we going to make a happier graduate? Are we going to make a more prepared graduate? Someone who is more confident to get out into the world and practice from graduation. And a lot of that had to do with their emphasis on things like competency-based learning, which I think we're talking about a lot more these days than we were back then. But, aiming at what does competent look like? And then how do we build a curriculum that gets them there? And I can tell you, like sitting through a lecture about sutures, not going to get them there, right? Like they have to experience it. They have to practice it. And so I was lucky enough that a lot of my colleagues around me at the time were also going through the process or similar processes to kind of learn how we more strategically and better educate our latest generation of vets. And it was really cool to collaborate with them and kind of work on how that looks in the future.
Yeah. And I do. I think we're constantly adapting, especially with new resources that are available. AI, whether that's a good word or bad word, it kind of depends who I'm talking to. But like there are other resources that we can leverage in good ways that hopefully, do you feel the same way?
People often talk about like as a society, our technological advances, they talk about the J curve, right? So things have been evolving all this time and then we've gotten this rapid acceleration. So personal opinion, I think that it's, it, it's here. Like these technologies are here. There is a lot of pressure on the veterinary profession to become more efficient. There are a lot of pets out there that need us. Our communities need us. And there's sometimes trouble, right, getting access to the things we have to offer. Sometimes we run into, stumbling blocks because it's tough to move as efficiently as we otherwise could. And I think there's a lot of technology out there that can help us with that. It's funny you say like AI might be good or bad depending on who you're talking to. And I would say it could be good and bad.
Mhm.
Like I think there are really amazing, responsible ways to use AI. One of my colleagues that I'm just in awe of all the things that he's doing is Patrick Welch. I think his title is Chief Learning Officer at Ethos. And he has been doing a lot of amazing work, not just with competency-based education, but also with, how to responsibly incorporate AI into our kind of logistical operational workings as a profession. And so he's a really exciting guy to talk to about some of these things. I won't go into specifically irresponsible uses of AI. I think there are ways to use it without quality control, quality assurance, without having the expertise on the back end to ensure that things are working effectively. But I think there are lots of places where it can be a massive tool, like writing discharge summaries, writing SOAPs, writing our records, making sure that we are capturing all the things that our clients are telling us about the pets that we're trying to take care of. So many ways that technology can help us. And just like education, it's like this whole other land of expertise, right? That people like Patrick Welch are going to continue to work on and hopefully make us better for it. And like we can't ignore those things, right? One other group that I want to call out that bias I'm a part of is Zoetis is partnering with folks in the profession to work through something called Revamp. This is a really exciting project. This is one of the couple reasons why I love Zoetis as a partner. So they have identified, like a lot of us in the profession, that we've got folks who are leaving because they can't, well, for many reasons, right? We have folks that are leaving the profession. And it makes me sad and a lot of other emotions that they are not finding what they need in the profession, so much so that they want to leave. And so, AHA put out this really great white paper on this issue, and they have a lot of great data points to look at. One of the things that this group is kind of looking to help with is actionable resources and steps that might help to keep people engaged in the profession and keep people kind of within what we do, right? There's a couple arms of that were identified as priorities. One of those is technology. The others are workplace culture, which is, a behemoth of an issue. And then the other one was, using your team, using your credentialed technicians to the best of their ability and to the extent of their license to help you every day. And then this third arm is technology. So many more things on that list other than AI, things like your practice management software, just getting digital with online booking, so many things that you can do to kind of make your day less tedious, less stressful, so that you can do the things you actually train to do. It's a really great group, and I've got a lot of optimism around the progress that we've been making.
That's really neat. So it's kind of interesting. So we started talking about education and then, kind of getting into resources. And also when we were talking before, it sounds like this path of understanding how to best equip people with learning and being able to take that forward. You also started to kind of see this overlap around leadership. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about that and how that kind of started, maybe even another little path for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is kind of wild to me, actually, how much overlap I saw between the educational content, like what I learned from that postgraduate certificate, and then what I started to grab onto in this kind of leadership development realm. So I, for a time, was the VP of education and quality for a company called UVC, which is like a middle sized hospital, owner of over 100 hospitals. And my job was to kind of build curriculum and educational opportunities to specifically support the folks in our hospitals that needed it. And one of the things that I was not anticipating, but became very clear as I started talking to the folks in the hospital, was that what they really needed and wanted was help, support, education around excellent leadership. And so, I started poking around within our profession for resources for that, right? Because it wasn't in my initial area of expertise. I think it's still not my area of expertise. It's something that I still think I'm a student of for sure. And I met a mutual friend of ours. So, Josh Weissman, if you are listening to this podcast and you have not figured out how to follow Josh Weissman on social or interact with him in some way, like figure out how to go do it, because he's just a fantastic human. So that's one. He's super motivating. He's such a positive guy. And he has done a lot of research on and education around leadership. So because I wanted to be prepared, this is one of the books that I own that is like one of my favorite things. If you don't have it and you are at all interested in leadership or just getting humans to do things in a positive way, I recommend this book. It's called Lead to Thrive. Josh wrote it. He has advanced training in positive psychology, which is a lot of where he bases his kind of leadership approach, which was very attractive to me because I think the thread that I saw through, educating adults to be professionals and then educating adults to be leaders is if you approach that from a positive place, you are so much more likely to have success. So it's not about like fake positivity. It's not about that. It's more about if you can find a way to support your folks and lead them through goal setting and reaching for doing things the way they want to do and will feel fulfilled as long as it obviously contributes to the mission, kind of no matter what that setting is, you are so much more likely to get to the place you want to go, whether that is better patient care, whether that is better workplace culture, whether that's increasing your team's skill set to perform a new task. Starting from that place and kind of making sure people, not just you, but like the people around you are involved in the conversation around picking those things, it's really, really impactful. And so I'm thankful every day that I know Josh Weissman because I feel like he solidified, you know how sometimes you have like all of these thoughts kind of sort of swirling in your brain and you've learned some things by trial and error. He has this great way of taking those things and kind of putting more solid words and structure around it. And I've gotten some really fantastic advice from him. And so I'm really thankful that he's a friend. And I'm sure I'm going to guess, Megan, that you feel similarly.
Very much so. Yeah. As you said, you've gotten a lot of advice from him. Is there something in particular that just like is on the top of your mind when you're thinking about that?
Yes. And it's funny because now I mostly try to give him credit when I do this, but one really profound piece of advice, especially now as I'm kind of in this chapter where I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want to do next to continue to contribute to the profession. He said, look, there is basically like a pile of things that you will not like in every job you do, right? So whether you are serving coffee at Starbucks, whether you are the CEO of a veterinary company, whether you are raising kids, like all of those jobs are going to have this kind of group of things that are not going to be your favorite thing. And one of the ways that he recommended I go about thinking about what I want to do with my life next is think about that list. Like, what are the non negotiables on that list? What are the things that you absolutely won't do again? And make that a list instead of making the list in a way where you're deciding what types of jobs you would do. Because if you make the list of things that are non negotiable that you will not do anymore, the list of jobs that you could do is maybe enormous, especially in vet med, right? Where there are so many choices rather than limit yourself by making the list of things, because there could be things you don't even know about yet. Like I didn't know that quality on a larger scale was something available to me until I was recruited into my previous job. I didn't know. I didn't know about, all of the various options and learning until I started talking to Pat Welch. I didn't know about all of the ways that you could build curriculum around leadership until I talked to Josh and others. But his advice, it resonated so powerfully with me that I did that. I made a list of things that were non-negotiable for me. And I, ended up having this kind of open system for what do I want to do? And so now I tell other people that, and I try to credit him. But it's really good. I think it's really good advice. It was super helpful for me.
Yeah. You mentioned you're at a point where you're kind of open to seeing what's next. So I think right now you're doing some consulting and adjunct faculty as well. The other thing that you had mentioned was that if you can find the corners of positivity and a network of people, that gets you in the right direction as well. And so you've mentioned quite a few different people that have been very impactful. Is there anything else you want to kind of expound on that thought that you had shared with me?
Absolutely. So one of the things that might feel harder sometimes for the introverts out there, which I'm an outgoing person, but I am actually introverted by nature, meaning like I need to go take a minute to recharge my battery when I'm in bigger social settings. However, one of the things that I highly recommend is keep in touch with the network, right? So if you have found people that you trust that are solidly reliable people in this profession that are enthusiastic about your success just as much as they are about theirs, hold on to them and make sure you continue to communicate with them and see if they'll agree to meet you monthly or, weekly, depending on kind of where you are in the cycle. Maybe even get out to the conferences to reconnect with everybody, get engaged in projects that allow you to kind of be in those settings. I think There are so many people in this profession that are just good humans that want to see their friends succeed and their colleagues succeed, and also want what's best for veterinary medicine. So find them, make friends, and keep in touch, because you never know when things will come up. I mean, the industry changing. I don't like the word industry for vet med. We're changing really quickly, right? There are, we mentioned technology, we mentioned kind of the way we're innovating around education and efficiency, and even just in patient care. We have so many better, excellent ways to take care of patients these days. We're constantly changing, which means there's constantly new opportunities that come up. There are jobs that don't exist today that might exist in 6 months from now. Like, even with new tech, like, we might find ourselves in a place where folks want to hire for someone who is willing to be an expert in AI in this space, or willing to research it because there's so much to learn. And, I think one of the things I love about a lot of the folks I've met in this industry is we like to learn, right? Like, that resonates throughout all of the groups within this profession. We like to learn. We really do. And so there's kind of infinite opportunity out there. So keep talking to your people because they might hear about things that are a great fit for you. And if you have that list of things that you just won't do, then you can feel like you've already got through that process. Then you can feel more excited and good about saying yes to learning more about other opportunities that don't fit those criteria.
Yes, those endless opportunities is a big reason why I have this podcast, and so I've been saying it for 3 years now, and so it's even more true, I think. I think more people are jumping on that, kind of seeing the changes, and I'm very proud. I think a lot of people yes, I think you should ask questions, but I also see a lot of people leaning into it and being more open to ask those questions and learn about these changes that are coming. And I think that's super exciting. I think somebody would hire you today, probably. If that was your area of interest in I bet people would hire you right now. On a personal note, just talking about back to the finding networks of people, I know that that's why I remain excited about being in veterinary medicine is every time I get to connect with another human being in our profession because we are really cool and it is the best profession because I think it's the people that make it that way. And that said, there will be a because this has happened recently, there will be a person out there that will not be super nice. And you have to like remember that that's one person among a bunch of others. So constantly surround yourself with those individuals. I think no matter where you are too, there is a possibility for feeling very isolated. And you can be around people and still feel isolated. So find your people, find the ones who uplift you, like find your Josh, but follow Josh, make Josh your Josh. Uh, but there are so many cool people out there like yourself. I saw an article about a student who specifically called you out as one of his support people as he was going through his schooling. I think he was going the military route and I think all of that kind of comes back to what you're talking about with the Zoetis revamp program is retaining people in this great field and allowing people to continually feel good about it being here. And whether it's your support network, constantly finding opportunities for you to grow as you get new interests and want to explore new things, I think all of those are so important.
Wholeheartedly agree. And hear you when you say, again, not all sunshine and butterflies, right? Like, there are any industry, right? There are folks out there where you like maybe don't trust and verify. That's what I like to say. Trust but verify. Ask the questions. Don't let everybody in because that's probably not a great strategic choice. But don't be so closed off that you can't find the great people. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, I want to go back to something that you mentioned kind of in the middle, and it was something about you have been changing your thoughts around veterinary medicine. You've changed it a couple of times. Do you mind going back to that a little bit, elaborate and maybe kind of end on where are you right now?
Yeah. Okay. So thought I wanted to be a veterinarian at age 5. It turns out I accomplished that. And I'm so thankful for all the people who helped me get there. And my view has evolved quite a few times from I want to specifically be a veterinarian who takes care of patients myself. Do I want to take care of patients while teaching others how to take care of those patients and kind of try to spread the kind of the enabling style of doing veterinary medicine as much as I can. And then that evolved even further to this is a profession where you need to develop expertise. And so, how do we make sure we are specifically educating in a way that gives them the tools to go out on their own and autonomously participate in this profession to the best of their ability? And so, I think where I am right now is that there are two big phases. There's really more. There's really three. Let's call it three. There's three big phases, I think, in the career of a veterinary professional. There's the intensive education bit where we are DVM candidates and we are getting through our program and trying to learn as much as we can in this kind of space where everyone around us is doing the same thing. And that needs to be optimized. We need to continue to look at that. We need to continue to innovate our curriculum to make sure that we're setting them up for success. And then the phase two, let's call it, is this jump, this enormous jump from I graduated med school to they gave me letters. I did all of this hard work. And now I'm like autonomously supposed to provide patient care and lead my team and be a leader in my hospital. Or if it's not a hospital, like within my research space or, within my team, that's a big, big jump. So how do we ensure that that jump is happening with all of the support we can give in a responsible way that sets them all up to practice confidently and with a happy, fulfilled end of the day? And then there's this other phase, which is, I've been out for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and maybe I want to keep practicing, but maybe I need to change the way I'm doing that. Maybe I want to build a new skill. Maybe I don't want to practice anymore myself, but I want to prepare others for practice. Maybe I want to do surgery only. Maybe I never want to do surgery again. Maybe I want to learn acupuncture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And I think I would love to see as a profession us grab onto that third phase a little more and say, like, how do we, and I keep mentioning DVMs. What I should be mentioning too is our entire team. This is true for our technicians, for our BTSs, for our assistants, for our CSRs. This is for everyone who's involved, our leadership. How do we take that third phase and make sure we're supporting growth and fulfillment in that area too? Because it's not like there's just a sunset there and we all just, we're innovators. We like to learn. And so if you like leave yourself stagnant out there in that third phase, there can be, maybe you don't even see it coming, but this kind of like lack of fulfillment could creep up on you. But we're such a huge profession with so many opportunities. I would love to see more focus on that group. And how do we make sure that they have what they need so that they stay and keep contributing?
Yeah. Well, I love those 3 stages, and I think that was a really good summary of of what we've talked about a little bit today. But I wanna, leave it open one last time to is there anything that you think we missed or wanna talk about or kind of hit home one last time?
Oh, um, I mean, I feel like we cannot say enough how many options there are in this profession and that leaving your net open to the people who feel like your people can help navigate those things. And then I guess the last thing I would say is if you are happy, like if you love this, you feel great about the things, you feel fulfilled, you feel like you're getting what you need, pay that to others. So make sure you're giving that opportunity to others. If you see folks who need like a leg up or a hand or a lunch to just, because sometimes you just need to talk it out, do it. Because I think it makes us all better when we support each other instead of not.
I think that's really good advice to speak out loud because sometimes we have to be intentional to think about that. It's like, "Oh, maybe I should just invite so and so to lunch." Like that's sometimes we have to like be intentional and take those actions because we're busy and we're focused, but yeah, I think that's what keeps our community strong and You have no idea how one day you needed that, somebody did it for you. Keep moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed for sure.
Awesome. Well, my last question that I always like to end on is what is something you are very grateful for right now?
Oh, one thing I am very grateful for right now, does it have to be veterinary professional?
No, completely open.
So I have a 5-year-old and she is on spring break and my parents-in-law are amazing humans and they have taken her to have like grandma and grandpa camp for the week. So she's off having a wonderful time, but it also means that I'm available to hang out with you and go teach on campus and prep for other jobs and things like that. So that I'm very grateful for that this week.